We're going to give everybody just another minute, top on a couple minutes, and then we'll get started.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Rich. How are you?
I'm good. I'm zooming from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom today.
I know.
Like we all probably are.
Yes. I'm hoping some more people come. Where is everybody? Thank you guys. Oh, hold on. Now, of course, everybody's joining the waiting room. As soon as I'm like, oh, we'll just start. Now everybody's hopping on. Hello, hello. Okay, well, it seems that people are still jumping on, so we're going to go ahead and just kind of get started, and I'll let people in as they come in. So, Julie, are you able to turn on your camera where you are? It's okay if you can't, but I had hoped to do something where you could see people. No. No. Okay, hold on, letting in another person. Okay, hi Elizabeth, how are you? Hi Elizabeth.
Hi.
Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started. And Annie, can you be on letting people in as they come in? Great. Okay, so we are going to start just with a little bit of an activity, very short, just to kind of see who is in the room. So, or who is coming into the room. So I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand if this statement that I am saying applies to you about your Israel travel history. So raise your hand if you traveled to Israel as a child. Raise your hand if you went to Israel with your or while you were in middle school. Look at those two. Okay, raise your hand if you went to Israel when you were in high school. Okay, put your hand down. We're going to go through the specifics. If you went to Israel in high school with your camp, raise your hand. If you went to Israel with your school in high school, raise your hand. If you did high school in Israel, raise your hand. Okay, if you did a summer trip that I have not yet covered, raise your hand. Awesome.
Summer trips.
Okay, this might divide by age here, but raise your hand if you did birthright. Okay. Raise your hand if you did study abroad in Israel while you were in college. Raise your hand if you went post-college or grad school in Israel. Raise your hand if you have staffed an Israel trip. Raise your hand if you have lived in Israel. Raise your hand. I don't think it's anybody. I was going to say if you've never been to Israel, but everybody here is raising their hand. Amazing. Thank you guys for doing that. It seems like we have all been to Israel in a variety of different ways at different times of our life, which is really cool to see. So it is my pleasure to introduce our guest today. This is Simon Amiel. Simon is the director of RootOne, which, as you all know, is the new initiative to increase teen Israel travel. So Simon, hold on, I'm going to read to you from Simon's bio. So Simon is a New York area-based nonprofit leader who specializes in organizational systems readiness, strategic planning, and design thinking. And he has held a variety of jobs in the Jewish world. So I'm going to read to you because I think they'll give you a sense of kind of his background in the Jewish world and Jewish programming. So he worked at Hillel as the director of student leadership for New York area students. He was the executive director of GW Hillel. He worked as the director of the North American Jewish Campus Service Corps, JCSC, and the director of student engagement for Hillel International. So Simon is of the world that we are all in, doing the work that we all have done in our lives, and I'm really excited he is now at RootOne and putting all of his talent and energy to helping to grow Israel travel. So I'm going to hand it off to Simon now, and he's going to tell us a little bit about RootOne and his work.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. And thanks all of you for having me here. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. Since it's still sort of a small group, Kelly, is it okay if folks that aren't part of the JumpSpark team, who I just quickly met, maybe just introduce themselves and where they are? Is that okay?
Yes,
Okay.
please, feel free.
Okay, cool. So let's start maybe with Talia.
Yeah, hello. So I'm Talia. I am the Youth and Teen Coordinator at Temple Sinai. So I work with ages kindergarten through 12th grade, but mostly with 7th through 12th grade. So the teen age range is like really where I'm at.
Got it. Okay. Lauren.
Yeah, I can go next. So I am Lauren. I am the Youth Engagement Coordinator at Temple Kol Emeth in Marietta. I also work with K through 12.
Got it. Elizabeth.
I am at Congregation B'nai Torah. I'm the Director of Education. The youth department actually falls under our associate rabbi. So we're dividing and conquering. There is a Ramah-related parallel meeting going on right now. So we're dividing and conquering because we're partners. Happy to be here and thank you so much.
Elizabeth, where are you from?
Born in India, moved to Israel
Awesome.
when I was 11 and came to the United States when I was 29.
How cool is that?
So high school, college, Israeli army, and then grad school here.
Wow, awesome. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Amy?
So I am part of the JumpSpark staff.
Yeah, I was going to say you look familiar already.
Yes, but I'm the parent coordinator, so working with parents of teens.
Okay, great. Rich, we've met. Melissa?
Hi, I'm Melissa. I run the Jewish Camp Initiative at the Federation in Atlanta. And we get a lot of kids going to camp who are now looking to go to Israel as sort of the continuation of that experience. So I'm really excited to
Awesome.
hear about
Okay,
that.
great. Okay, and everybody else is, I think, is with JumpSpark, right? Okay, cool. Okay, great. Thank you. So, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of your awesomeness, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about RootOne, get you up to speed. I'm happy to also answer any questions that you have. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we've learned so far. And then I'm going to tap your brains a little bit based on your experience, what you know, what you've seen, because we're new, right? We're starting and we're learning. And so the more that we can hear from people on the ground, the better. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen as soon as I can find what it is that I'm looking for. Hello. Show all windows. Let's see here. Here we go. Okay. So, okay. This is my title slide. Please be impressed with it. Okay, next. You all know who this is, I'm assuming, right? Living in Atlanta. This is our friend Bernie Marcus. He's the founder of RootOne. This is the man who has thought about and helped lift RootOne off the ground. He actually didn't think of the name. When we came to him with the name, he said, we thought he was a great marketer. And he said to us, I'm a terrible marketer. Do you want to know what the original name of Home Depot was? We said, what? He said it was like Bernie's Barrel of something or another. We're like, that's an awful name. And he goes, I agree. That's why I'm a terrible marketer. It was really shocking. Anyway, he did say to us, you know, we want young people stepping onto their college campuses with deep connections to Israel and strong Jewish identities. And these types of trips are proven to greatly impact participants in these ways. So that's the lens through which we're looking at the decisions that we make, right? In the sort of midterm, our goal is not necessarily about Israel or Israel trips per se. Our goal is about deep connections with Israel, deep connections with Jewish identities. And as you all know, if anyone's going to have any hope of having a deep connection to Israel, it has to start first with an organic connection and cementing of one's Jewish identity and one's Jewish connection. So we start there. That's our foundation. That's our funder right now. And just so you know, we are looking to add other foundations and donors to what it is that we're doing and to join Mr. Marcus in his generosity to help grow our organization. So what is RootOne? By the way, the name RootOne is a nod to Kvish HaChof, which is the highway that runs between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, which is Highway 1, but RootOne is creative license. Also, the word, of course, root, it's towards our roots. For many of the kids that are going, it is their first experience. So the number 1, also one, the notion of unity of the Jewish people, the oneness of the state of Israel. If you're particularly religious, the oneness of God. All right, there's a lot there that's connected to the word and the name RootOne. So what is RootOne? Number 1, our goal is to transform the trajectory of North American Jewry. No big deal. Not a big deal at all to transform the trajectory of North American Jewry. And to develop a generation of North American Jewish teenagers best prepared for the challenges of college and emerging adulthood. Okay, so that's what we're trying to achieve. That's gigantic, and we can't do it alone, and we have to do it in partnership with smart people like you, right, who know what they're doing, who are committed to this work. So this, again, if we take what Bernie said, we translate it into things that we're trying to achieve. These are the 2 big deals that we're trying to figure out. So it's like if you ever watch Shark Tank and people are up there pitching an item, I always love it when one of the sharks say, oh, so you're a marketing company and this is the thing that you're trying to, sell. We are a Jewish transformational organization, and Israel Trips is the mechanism, right, that we're utilizing. And it's wonderful because Israel is at the center of our experience, is one of the centers of our experience as a Jewish community. So why did we choose Peer Israel Trips to help us reach these goals, right? We've chosen Peer Israel Trips as the primary, as the center mechanism to make that happen. So why? I'm sure a lot of you know this already. A lot of data shows that immersive Peer Israel Trips strengthen Jewish identity and connection to Israel. They inspire Jewish teens to be more confident and proud Jews as they enter the next stage of their lives. They can transform how teens think about being Jewish. They connect teens to their local communities, to Israel, and to the world. And they build real friendships with their own peers, but also with Israeli peers, right? When they go immersive like that, and that's something that we are doing at a very significant level. We are intentionally building relationships prior to the trips and during the trips with Israeli peers, right? We want there to be not just a relationship and an understanding of Israel as a place that you tour and connect, but we want teens to understand the Israeli experience. And so we're trying to now take what maybe some of you have experienced when you have the traditional mifgash of showing up at an, awkwardly at an Israeli middle school for 3 hours and watch them change classes, to a much more in-depth experience over a number of days where you can truly understand to some degree the Israeli experience. So these are some of the reasons why we've chosen Peer Israel Trips as the centerpiece and the center mechanism for helping to transform a generation of Jewish teens. But it's just not the trips itself, it's the overall Peer Israel experience that we're looking at as our platform. So what do I mean by that? So we are looking, to lower barriers to participation by decreasing costs for Jewish teens to travel to Israel. So many of you may have heard already about these vouchers because they're like the shiniest, most fun thing that lots of people are talking about. The RootOne vouchers reduce the costs for families and for young people by $3,000. For many people, that's enough of an incentive. For others, When you combine that with some of the subsidies that other organizations bring in, that can reduce the cost for many people to about $1,500, which is actually the minimum that we ask families to put in because we have the basic skin in the game philosophy. So $1,500 for a minimum 20-day experience in Israel, travel included, is a screaming deal, right? And it's a wonderful incentive for a lot of people, many of whom who have said to us, we just haven't been able to afford the experience before. So that's number one. Number two, we also want to ensure that we are incubating new trips, and this is not happening this year, but down the line, we want to incubate new trips to provide differentiated experiences for an increasing and diversified marketplace. So this year, what we're doing, and Kelly knows this well, we're investing in existing trips. So organizations like BBYO, organizations like JCCA camps across the country, other organizations, we've given them up to X number of vouchers, and they have been able to increase up to about 40% over 2019, the number of kids who are registered to go to Israel. So a 40% jump is pretty significant, and we love that. And that's happening this year. But as we move forward, we're not going to be successful if we continually just ask those who know the kids who are a bit more on the inside to increase those numbers. We need to start moving out towards the periphery. So a big part of our goal is to incubate new types of trips and new types of opportunities for kids who are a bit more out on the periphery to connect into. What do I mean? It could be almost anything, but some of the things I'm imagining is if you could, imagine these young people, these teenagers who aren't connected to youth groups, aren't connected to temples and congregations, aren't connected to Jewish camps, who, if you ask them how they identify, Jewish might not be in their top 3 or even their top 5 lists of their identity factors, but being a dancer might be their number 1, or a photographer might be their number 1 or number 2, or a tech guru might be in their top 3 or 4, right? We want to create buses of filled with young people who are interested in modern dance, who might spend 3 weeks in Israel connected to the modern dance and art scene in Israel, while at the same time having a unique and significant Jewish experience. We have to figure out how to make that happen. But those are ways that we could ostensibly create relevance for those kids because they're not already connected to a community through a youth group. So that's a big part of what we want to try to achieve. And third, and I think this is probably the most important thing that we do, and the thing that is the greatest lift and where we need the most help, is that we're elevating, we want to elevate the field. We haven't yet done this, but we want to elevate the field together by developing top shelf Israel peer trips with dynamic wraparound experiences. That's a lot of jargon. Essentially what that means is we want to be able to figure out how to help organizations and create new trips that are very sticky in their experience. And we believe that a gigantic part of that formula is what happens with the teens prior to going on this trip, and most importantly, what happens after they return. Some of you might know, there has been in organizations far more resourced than ours, a series of failures when it comes to what happens with kids upon their return. Birthright Next, Birthright right now doesn't invest at all in post-trip engagement. It's just difficult. It doesn't happen. And so we're still believers that it can happen. And we are working with our partners and our grantees to figure out how we can make that work. Because ultimately, if we just let them return and go to their own devices, our chances of getting them to campus prepared, connected, built, right, building upon the whatever experience they had in Israel will obviously to some degree, and for many of them, fade away. So the platform needs to focus on these 3 areas, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So just a couple more words about this. So our engagement progression, at the beginning, expanding in the established trips, moving out to incubation of new trips within existing organizations, then incubating specialized interest trips, and then who the heck knows where we go from there. We've got to figure out, what the next strata looks like. And that's just an exciting place to be. We don't know what that'll look like ultimately. Right now, our immediate growth, oops, sorry about that. Our immediate growth, I'm trying to move this thing here. Our immediate growth looks like this. This year, our goal is to hopefully, we're still running on hope, send about 5,000 kids to Israel. Next year and the subsequent years, increase that by 1,000. So by 2025, we want to get it to about 9,000. When teen travel to Israel was fairly normative in the 90s, there are about 12,000 teens from North America that were traveling on an annual basis. So at 2025, we hope to be scaling to some degree the young people that are sort of on the inside. And that's when we really want to start turning our attention and our resources towards significantly engaging those that are on the periphery to add and increase those numbers so that we can double and then double again and double again over the course of periods of years. Okay, lastly is this idea of pre and post engagement. So I want to go through this slide with you. Our plan is establish these clear pre-trip expectations, answer questions, inspire curiosity, create social bonds. Want to prepare the participants for the long term, and we think that the experience will impact how they engage Jewishly and vis-a-vis Israel on campus and beyond. Want to create community, and we want to create continuity. Now I want to see all your faces, so I'm gonna show my view here so I can see everyone's face, and I just want to see how excited are you about this last slide. Are you highly excited about this last slide? No, of course you're not, because it's incredibly boring. No, Lauren, no, it's boring. It's boring. We need you to help us crack the code, okay? This is a terrible slide. It's an awful slide. That's why I wanted to see your faces. I want to see how many of you were just trying to make me happy. This is a bad slide. Sure, I mean, these are the goals that we want to try to achieve. But the fact of the matter is, if we rely on the same formula, it's just not going to happen. And so one of the things that I would love to hear from you, and a little bit put you on the spot, but there's no, whatever. I'm not grading you, right? This is all just fun and creative. I'm really interested to hear from you and think about when, in your experience, even personally, or in your experience working with young people, when they're coming back from an immersive experience and you're looking to build strategically on that immersive experience, pipe in with things that have worked, but I would love to hear when you think without financial limits, not to say that we don't have them, but when you think without financial limits, when you think about blue sky, can you imagine an environment? Can you imagine an opportunity that would attract and be relevant to the young people with whom you work, that you could describe, even in chunks? I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that. I'd love to hear what you might think are some interesting ideas to throw out there. So that's what I'd love to hear. That's the interactive portion of today. I'd love to put you on the spot and hear what you guys think and help me crack the code. So the more people I listen to, the better and the smarter we get. So I'm going to shut up, and I'd love to hear from you, and then we can do some questions. Is that fair? Awesome.
Can I ask that you stop share so we can see everybody?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So everybody off mute. unless you're doing something weird, some weird noises somewhere that I don't want to hear. But let's just sort of like come together a little bit, right? Forget about the stuff that we've already, that we've probably done that we think kind of semi works and maybe we feel a little guilty about. Like, what are the things that are super wacky that you can just imagine doing, right? Can you bring Netta to Atlanta, and Natan Sharansky and whatever? Yeah, you can. And that's maybe not wacky, but maybe effective. Can you do something even crazier? Like, what's out there that you think might fly?
So Simon, one of the things that I thought of as you were just talking about the specialty trips is we think about that in terms of when we bring our kids to Israel, but we don't think of it in terms of when we bring Israel here to our kids. And if our Israel education model is only about, teaching from war to war to war, and it's not like, an Israel Film Festival, Israeli music, Israeli art, and engaging our kids with Israel in that way, both before and after an experience, that to me is the missed opportunity.
Totally right. And in fact, maybe that's the lead, right? Maybe that's the lead, and the secondary component comes with, especially on the pre side, comes with the content, right? The lead might be fun and interesting and compelling and speaks to who they are and how they identify. Okay, good. What else?
I also think that a lot of, like, you're never going to be able to recreate that trip, right? Like being in that experience, you're never going to be
not the goal.
Do that. Right. So I think a lot of what teens find valuable is having something tangible after that trip, having a memento, having something that they can always come back to, relate to, have something to really represent that trip. So whether it's, again, I'm thinking wacky, like you said, subscribe to an Israeli snack service for a year. Like,
Jesse, that is too wacky.
Sorry.
I'm just joking. I'm joking. Yeah.
Or, and then maybe if they meet Israelis, like they could subscribe to an American snack thing, and then we could talk about food culture and food justice and tie a million things together. But I think the main thing is like having that tangible piece from the trip that is continuous. Maybe not an object, but maybe it's food or something different each month.
How important is it, Jesse, for there to be an object and an interaction as opposed to just an object?
I think they have to go hand in hand. I mean, I think the object is the leading step. Like if I got something in the mail, like, whoa, like I remember when this was on my trip or whatever. I did not have the best experience because I'm allergic to nuts. So I cannot go back to my trip in Israel. But if I got something.
For Jesse.
Exactly. I had many reactions. But if I got something that was so like meaningful to me in my trip, and then we reunited with everyone or we met with other kids that went on the same trip at a different time, I think that to me brings it full circle.
Got it.
I'm just riffing off of that also with the specialty camp, with this specialty trip model, and how you could also connect that sort of follow-up engagement to the type of experience that they may have had, particularly with the more specialty minded, right? So thinking about dancers stuck with me. I was a dancer in my adolescence, right? So I'm imagining connecting with like new clips, right? Even like just like sending a video of like something that's happening there, and then you can like have a conversation about it, right? Just like things that connect you back in, but are related also to what you liked, right? Like not everyone wants to get the same thing, right? So it's sort of that next level of customization of that follow-up experience, sort of really geared around why people went and what was meaningful. And you can also use sort of like the vibe you get from the trip of like what's resonating with people, like with this particular cohort, and that it's not the same necessarily for each cohort, because every group is going to have a different dynamic and different things that are going to resonate with them.
Good. Yeah. We were thinking about that. In fact, we were actually thinking about right now sending out, those Buzzfeed surveys, what kind of whatever are you? We're thinking about doing like what kind of Israel traveler are you, and have like a whole list of things, and then they choose who they are, and then they'll get like a welcome box, and it'll have, they'll have some of the same things, like they'll get adapters or a branded this or that, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll get some things like if you're a nervous Israel traveler, you'll get whatever, a bottle of Imodium or, whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's obviously not going to happen, but you would get, point is you'd get specialized stuff, right? And then you get a QR code that you scan, and then you've got to watch like some killer content, answer a couple of questions, and then you get an admission thing to an online, you know, concert by whomever on Hanukkah, that only RootOne kids are, you know, whatever, something along those lines where it's stuff and interaction, so Jesse, I mean, it was really good to hear what you said, because I think that's the vibe that we're kind of getting and that we hear over and over again. Yeah, Lauren, I think you had your hand up.
I did. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of this part of the conversation.
Well,
but,
just say whatever you think we were talking about, and then we'll either make fun of you or it'll be good.
Well, I was
Go
going
ahead.
to jump off of what Jesse said, because I remember when I went on my birthright trip. Well, first of all, I've actually only been on trips to Israel that were organized, which kind of makes me want to be able to go on an unorganized trip just to like experience it differently. But I didn't know barely anyone on my birthright trip when I went. I didn't go with a group of people that I already knew. And so we were able to like form very close connections on that trip, and including with the Israelis as well as the other Americans on the trip. And I think that what Jesse was saying about like having meetups or reunion type situations afterwards, because we had group chats that like a big group chat of just our bus for months and months. I mean, it's still on my phone, but no one messages in there anymore. But we still stay connected. All of us have each other on social media. I think this might be like way too out there of an idea, but you know how the Israelis join an American trip of the Americans on birthright?
Yeah.
What if it was kind of like we bring the Israelis to America
and
do something like similar? Like it can't be a birthright trip because we're not in Israel, right? But like a reunion of some sorts, but like kind of like flipping it around to say like, here are the Israelis, we're now bringing them to show them how you guys live in America.
Yep. Okay. And that's just it's an excuse for people to get together live.
Right.
meet back up and make sure those connections are staying strong. Because connections to people in Israel, for me at least, leads to connections with Israel itself.
What Lauren, you know, the idea of the ongoing chat, right?
Yeah.
So in my experience, and like it's hilarious, my kids' experience, my kids are, so my three older ones have all gone on big trips, right? To Israel. And they all come back and they're all hyped about staying connected. And then I'm like, hey, have you been talking to, like, no, nobody talks to anyone anymore, right? It all happens to me when I was a kid. I remember it. What's a factor that you could add to that formula where it doesn't die so easily? Like, it's gonna die, I think, right? Because it'd be slightly awkward when you're 50 still speaking to everyone on your bus. But how do you extend it? How do you extend the relevance? You know, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think, I'm not sure that I have specifics. I think Kelly might have something, but I was going to say.
Way to pass the buck, Lauren. Good job. Manage up.
I'll take it, Lauren. It's fine.
Okay, go for it, Kelly.
So I will say, I went on high school in Israel, fall of 1999. I was in Israel. And so that has been, a while. And I still talk to a ton of people from my trip. Last year, I was at the ARJE, the Association of Reformed Jewish Educator Conference, and there were 5 of us from my semester in Israel all there because we are all now Jewish professionals. And we went on the Reform Movement high school trip, so it made sense that that's where people were. So I would say, I don't know I feel like technology has made that so much easier, and we've all been able to find each other again when, we have a Facebook group where we're all in. I remember starting that Facebook group, in like 2005 when we were all just first starting to be on Facebook. We made that group and all kind of refound each other. And now I would say I talk to them, at least every now and then, a good number of them.
Yeah, I'm still connected on social media to people I went on USY summer pilgrimage with in 1989. So.
Well, just to add to that.
Oh my God. Are you okay being on this call, Rich?
Well, I'll add to that and I align with Rich and having a high school age kids. And, my daughter is a Ramada Rome camper, and that, didn't happen this summer, but instead they did roll out a pretty robust program virtually with the kids, the teens, and their counselors and other professionals to kind of bring them together, but also it was facilitated. It wasn't just, hey guys, what's up? There was some kind of topic that was appealing to the kids, you know, and so I could see that as when the group gets home, you know, all the kids that were on, I mean, I'm just using seminar, for example, that they have some kind of facilitated monthly or 6 weeks or however, you know, conversation with a topic that is interesting to them, but that's Israel Jewish related. And that kind of keeps them as a group and keeps them engaged.
Got it.
I'll say, sorry, I just want to say, so I went on the Frank mission. And everybody knows what that is, right? And
on the, I'm sorry, on the what mission?
I don't think Simon does. Atlanta.
Okay.
Might.
Oh, good. So I'll tell you. So a family in Atlanta sends a group of adults, lay leaders, to Israel every year. Obviously, we didn't go this past year, and it's about 12 to 15 people, and it's always their son, Isaac Frank, who's a very influential, warm, Hamish person that lives in this community, goes on all the trips. And then after they come back, I think there've been 7 trips, so 7 years. And we have, it's a group that stays together, that is so bonded because it's a small group. And we have like a group of people that's sort of like on the board who help plan. We mentor. We have mentors for each person that goes, that you meet with your mentor before and after. You connect with each other through like purely social events, or sometimes we'll add to it, like we'll all go to like a concert at the Jewish Music Festival, and then we'll have drinks afterwards. And it's one of those, he got probably a group of 30 to go to the APEC policy conference in March, beginning of March. It's one of those trips that people feel so connected to each other, but to him in particular. And then he's constantly bringing people into the community through the things that he does. And then we are bringing each other in. And it really is extraordinary. I went on year 2, and I'm so bonded even with the people who didn't even go on my trip. So they do an amazing job of like creating this community of people that loves being together and loves connecting and helping each other and helping each other's causes. I wonder with teens, it's a little harder because they're so busy and they're off doing their things. I love the idea of special interests. Like if you put together a group of kids who are crazy about baseball, right? And they go and they are going to go watch like the Maccabi baseball team play, or meet some, or for basketball, and they'd be in Israel and they'd meet like the famous,
train with them, and
or even most of the Israeli baseball team are Americans, so we could probably get some of them.
Right. And maybe they could come on the trip with them, and then we could engage them afterwards by like having them, you know, engage with some of those players who come to town to play the Braves, or I don't know, I think that would be like a kid's total dream.
But what are the incentives for high school kids outside of cool swag? Right? And by the way, we are investing in very cool swag, like top shelf, high level cool swag. But aside from cool swag, what are the incentives? Stuff that goes on their college application. Okay, right?
That's a huge one.
We are so huge. Jewish. Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But
makes sense.
To add that sort of leadership component in there. Maybe when they come back, they serve on a board that helps mentor the new RootOne people that go.
Certificate in peer leadership.
Right. I think also the incentive has to be that their friends are going. Doesn't even matter if it's a presentation on something that happened on their trip and they loved it so much. If none of their friends are going, don't expect them to show up. Like it's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
For like but so I think maybe like you were hinting at, like having these people who were on the trips, like be engagement teen leaders for you, like to like get people to come to these events, like having that peer-to-peer level of making sure that the incentives are still there. Because as much as these events and incentives would be great, if their friends aren't going, then all bets are off.
Right.
One thing we haven't touched on, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I just want to throw this out there as another thing to think about, is we have a huge community of Israelis who live here in Atlanta. And is there a better way that we could engage with that community to bring some of Israel, to keep Israel on the front burner with our kids before and after they go? And some of those Israelis own Israeli restaurants, and some of them,
Right, like having an Israeli host family, but having an Israeli host family here in Atlanta.
Yeah, and I just think it's like, we were always looking for ways to connect that community to the Jewish community, but they're also a resource to us who grew up in Israel, lived in Israel, came here for a variety of reasons, and to me it's an untapped resource.
Yeah. So that's actually a perfect segue to what I wanted to say. Thank you, Rich. And thank you, Simon, for the work that you're doing, because
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
this is really important and amazing. And over the years, at being an educator in other communities as well, I have found that it's really like they go to Israel, whether it's in high school or the birthright, and they're all excited and they come back and and then, it fizzles out. And so my daughter, a child of Israeli parents, in college, so I wanted to, when she started college, she went on the birthright trip, and these trips are what, they individually bring to the trips as well. And so, and some of it, has been said, and those connections are wonderful, but not everyone sort of, follows the same path. So she actually connected with children of Israelis, and it's the first time. And then when she came back, she said, "Why didn't you tell me there was Tzofim chapter in Philadelphia where she grew up," and etc. But my point is that after she came back and the following year, after she did birthright during her first year in college, the Hillel there had scholarships for them to go to the IAC. That's the conference that they have in Los Angeles. And that was the first time that she felt immersed and connected after having that feeling in Israel. So I was going to suggest, and some of her friends that she made on this birthright trip also ended up coming to that conference, and then they became closer. So what I wanted to say is maybe to kind of look into what are the kinds of things that they do. I know they have Israeli foods and Israeli speakers, but it's that one-shot deal of every month getting together to talk about an Israeli topic that doesn't work, at least from my experience. But maybe, so I want to be, a little more realistic and say that maybe a couple of times a year, having like 3 days of another IAC type immersion in Israeli culture and food and songs and speakers and concerts is something that, and then every year she looked forward to when's the next time the IAC conference is going to happen. And she always wanted to, and she did, she went to more than one, because that's where she really, and she'd come back and she'd have all this love and energy and excitement for that would take her through a few more months and make her reach out to her friends that she met on the birthright trip. And so, I don't know, just
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I didn't mention is that part of the deal, right? You get a voucher, and part of the deal is that you also give us your contact information that we then, in the second half, or as you approach the second half of your senior year, we share it with like-minded organizations, right? And the idea is that we strategically then, especially if we learn about them, or if we know when we get to the point of their understanding their specific interests or how they identify just as a person, we can be really strategic and really niched and figure out where we want to send that information so that they can have super relevant and curated information on Jewish opportunities that relate to them specifically. But yeah, I mean, you're right. And you know, frankly, part of this is to be highly effective, we're probably going to have to be highly inefficient to some degree at first, which is to say, there are going to be people who want to nerd out and, you know, have those discussions, right? And there are going to be lots of people who don't. And so that doesn't mean that we shouldn't make them available or figure that out. So it'll be an interesting, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's right. That idea of communal, right, immersive experiences and replaying it to a degree is helpful. While we can't reenact that feeling, right, there are opportunities for re-immersion every once in a while. Yeah, I hear it. Yeah.
So I'm interested in thinking about, thinking about kind of Jewish multiculturalism and Jews of color. And I think that in my past life, when I was an elementary school teacher, I did a Jews around the world unit, right? It was a big focus of 3rd grade. And basically every country, like we talk about Jews in Ethiopia, and it was like, Jews were in Ethiopia, their life was horrible, and now they're in Israel, everything's great. Like that was every country that we looked at, it kind of glossed over the individual character of that country and kind of leaned into Israel as a melting pot, which I think is really amazing. But I'm wondering if there are opportunities to travel to other places, maybe Americans and Israelis together, to experience other parts of the Jewish world, other Jewish, I mean, I just think it's so, we're thinking a lot, obviously, you know, right now about connecting American teens and Israeli teens and just like the deep value that both parties can get out of that interaction. And I think even more so with Jews from even other countries that we kind of haven't included in our kind of canon of Jewish countries or Jewish experiences that we talk to teens about, and how powerful it could be to take Israeli and American teens to Argentina, Morocco, right? Like places that have amazing Jewish history and Jewish life.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought. I mean, we're not even near there, right? But interestingly, so, you know, we have, when, you know, as you remember, as you might recall, right, in one of the slides, the investment is not just in lowering the barrier in terms of lowering the cost, but also investing in the experience itself. And we have 7 educational principles. One of them is diversity. And so because, right, so as an example, my 3 older kids have gone on trips that they have all described as really fun, but essentially Israel Disneyland, where, right, so my family is Sephardic. We, by no case do we have any understanding or feeling that the people that came from our countries into Israel was a pleasant or even fair experience, right? It wasn't. And they were treated poorly, and, you know, et cetera, and all these things. So, and we have most of our families in Israel. So, but it's important that we think anyway, that people who go to Israel understand that, and understand that Israel is complicated, and not just, and also not to mention the political scenario, right? So, but to your point, Kelly, specifically, the multiculturalism of Israel and the fact that it still exists and is still so important. And people, there's actually a really interesting discussion to be had, just like you still can have that in America. Is Israel a melting pot or not, right? It's still an important discussion. And that's something that we want to see happen. And we're going to be pushing our partners to ensure happens, so that it's not just, look at Israel, isn't it beautiful? Everyone gets along and it's all cool, right? That's not, right? You got to talk. I mean, no family's all cool. You got to be able to talk about it and figure it out. So the notion of multiculturalism, because also it plays against one of the points of misinformation against Israel, that it is all homogeneous, that it's all white, Ashkenazi, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. That's also an important idea too, in terms of preparation for campus. But I don't know that we'll ever get to, adding the additional travel to Argentina, but wouldn't that be cool?
But it's also, I think, when it's been presented in the past, that multicultural, it's a very simplified,
Yes. Yeah.
Look, Israel rescued all the Ethiopians when the, you know, truth is much more complex and complicated.
Way more.
And a lot of the same, you know, issues that we struggle with in our country are issues that they struggle with in
Totally
Israel.
right. Totally right. And that kids
and
want to get into.
They want to get into it. They want that more authentic experience.
That's right.
And it's time for us to do that.
Agreed. Yeah, Melissa.
So I get that like going to Argentina might be hard, but if COVID has taught us anything, it is that it is not hard to convene people virtually from across the world.
No.
So what would it look like to say, right, we're going to gather these people in different ways, and you can still learn from the Jews of Argentina and Morocco and whatever.
It's a great call. Yeah, that's a great. I thought you were going to say go to a kosher Argentinian restaurant, because that's also easy and cheaper. Well, it depends where you live. I just moved to New York. It's way right. I just moved to New York from Seattle, so it's like way easier here. But no, you're right. Virtually is a great idea. I think that's a great call. Good. Any other questions about RootOne or thoughts to add? I mean, this is great. You guys have taken a bunch of notes. This is great. This is really helpful to us. This is great. I've totally taken advantage of you, and I appreciate you letting me do that. So thank you. But any other thoughts or questions? Awesome. Okay. I don't know if I'm supposed to fill the other 7 minutes. I could dance.
You are totally fine.
I can sing. Oh, okay. I mean, I can't do either of those things. I could try, but
I kind of want to make you do it, but
no,
okay.
No.
Oh, thank you so much, Simon. I think that I really appreciate coming, sharing about RootOne, facilitating this conversation. As you all know, and I talked about before, JumpSpark is a partner in this work, and cracking this code that Simon is talking about is exactly the work that we are going to be doing. And we have some plans, and we're working on them right now, but we're going to be relying on you, just like Simon did, for feedback and response and implementation and figuring out kind of how all this happens, because for all the reasons Simon shared, Israel travel is, we all raised our hand at different points, right? It's an impactful part of a Jewish journey, and one we want to make sure that our teens here in Israel our teens here in Atlanta are really getting the most of pre, during, and post. So
awesome.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Oh,
yeah.
Before we leave.
Where to go, Amy? Are you going to ask if there's homework?
Yeah, right?
You're like the worst. No, go ahead. Of course, please.
So if we know one thing about American teens is that they're overscheduled. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the whole concept of 20 days of trying to find 20 days in a teen schedule, especially one who's in camp. And in the North in particular, kids are camp at least 4 weeks and sometimes 8. And so how do you find that time? And is that something that RootOne is willing to kind of play with and shorten the trip a little bit so they can actually do a spring break or do it over winter break or during times where they can fit it in?
Yeah, right now, no. Just because there's, we're having no trouble filling those slots. And as we, we're also learning, so we'll see. But also keep in mind, who the primary target of this, of this trip is. We're looking to change hearts and minds and really shift. So that doesn't mean that kids that are on the periphery don't go to summer camp and aren't overscheduled. If we find that, that's happening, then we're idiots if we're not listening. But right now, that's not the plan. And part of the reason is, again, that we know that there's a correlation there. We just understand that there's such an important emphasis that we're putting on the impact itself, and it's just much harder to have that impact in 10 days or even 2 weeks. But we'll see. I mean, we're going to see. Look, we're putting a ton of resources in evaluation and impact evaluation. And if we're learning something that allows us, both in terms of demand and the restrictions that I think you intelligently put forward, as well as overall impact, then we'll have to shift. But we're in year 1, so right now, no. But you never know.
Yep. Thank
I'll
you.
be running for office, by the way. But no, I mean that's our approach at this point.
Awesome. So thank you guys all so much for being here. Thank you again to Simon. And I will just tell you, this is just the beginning of this work here in Atlanta. And we're really excited that everyone is on board together to help make an impact here in Atlanta.
Yeah,
So
thanks
thanks
guys.
all for
Yeah,
being here.
thank you. It's great meeting you all. Take care.
Bye.